right, it's another Tuesday, it's another month rolling around. The 1st of November, this of course means that the Reserve Bank Board will meet. And today we will find out if they continue on their quest to dampen inflation by increasing interest rates. If that continues, it has so far, we've seen the fastest rate hikes in history. Will that continue? Just about everyone, in fact everyone, says yes. It will, with most pointing to a 25 basis point rise, some not ruling out a 50 point rise given the high inflation figures we saw just recently, just last week. Martin North is the principal with Digital Finance Analytics here locally and joins me now. Martin North, good morning.
Good morning.
Okay. Are you prepared on this Melbourne Cup day to take a punt? What do you reckon the Reserve Bank Board will tell us this afternoon?
Well, 25 basis points is baked in, but 50 basis points is definitely on the card. The reason I say that is because the inflation number came in a lot hotter, 7.3% than everybody expected. But more importantly, the non-discretionary inflation, that's the stuff you have to pay, was 8.4, which was huge. And that means that the chances of 50 is significant, I think.
Okay. And so in that non-discretionary imaginary shopping basket, what is that? That's what, food, petrol, that sort of stuff?
Things like food and petrol, all the things you've got to pay for, gas, electricity, all of those things. And a lot of the inflation pressure is coming now from power, and that's gas directly and also electricity prices. And of course, we know from the last budget update that those prices are going to continue to go lots higher. So those who argued that this inflationary story is, temporary, I fear are not telling the full story. There's a lot of it that's now really stuck into the forward expectation. Another reason why I think the Reserve Bank is going to have to keep putting rates higher. And in fact, most of the major banks are now expecting what's called the terminal rate, in other words, how high they'll go, to be higher than previously expected.
Okay. So this must be a concern for the Reserve Bank. Yes, the headline inflation figure being higher than expected, but the fact that it is, in that non-discretionary spending category, because clearly people can't afford to not spend in those in that area. What can be done about non-discretionary inflation figures?
Well, it is very difficult because if I look at food prices, for example, which were one of the ones that really stood out this time, some of that's being generated by all the floods because essentially there are products that aren't available or only available in less the normal supply. That's not something you can fix quickly, or indeed the gas price, which, we're paying international prices for our gas at the moment simply because of the way that the gas market works. Now, there are discussions there about perhaps imposing more restrictions on those prices, but that's going to be complicated and might take some time. So the point I would make is that some of those non-discretionary things are very difficult to control. The third one, of course, is international prices for petroleum. Now, the petroleum price came down. It's come up again now. But, of course, we buy in US dollars, and our exchange rate's now lower, which means we're having to pay more for the petroleum that's coming into the country. So my point is that a lot of these non-discretionary elements are not controllable, at least in the short term. Now,
go on. Yep.
So the Reserve Bank has absolutely rightly said we have to get inflation back down. It's the most critical thing because, of course, strong inflation crushes everybody, but it specifically crushes those on more limited incomes. And so, therefore, the Reserve Bank is really caught now with having to put rates higher than they would want to, despite the fact that it has significant impacts on many households.
So if it is largely these external and unavoidable influences that are pushing inflation up, does that mean that is there any evidence that the rate hikes we've seen so far are putting a lid on inflation, or has that effect been hidden because of these external and unavoidable influences?
Well, if you look at the trend, of course, the inflation's high, and the budget paper said they were targeting 7.75% as the peak. We're at 7.3% now, and we're only in September, October time. So the chances are that inflation is going to be higher than the Reserve Bank was expecting. And so, in a way, what they've been doing so far has had little effect. And by the way, this isn't just here in Australia. Around the world, other economies are exactly the same position. So, for example, overnight in the Eurozone, the inflation's there. It's at 10.7% higher than expected. So we keep seeing these inflation numbers hitting new highs. So it begs two questions. The first is, will high interest rates crush inflation eventually? And everybody thinks, well, in the mainstream that that's the case. My own view is it may, but it's going to be a long, hard process. The second is, how high will rates go and for how long will they stay high? And that's the other factor now that's changed. So people were saying a few months ago, well, rates will come down quite quickly because inflation will come down. Inflation is now embedded, and that means that we're going to see high inflation through 2023 into 2024, and even the budget papers last week said don't expect any real wages growth for the next couple of years. So we're going to be going backwards from an income perspective while the cost of living continues to rise. We are in a quite uncomfortable position, I think.
What do you think about the effect, the economic effect of any kind of cost of living relief that a government might provide to a targeted group of people, for example, those on the lowest incomes who are clearly going to be squeezed the most and will bear most of the pain? All this talk about the inflationary effect of that, what do you make of it? How significant is it? And is it really the case that the government couldn't provide that cost of living relief to people who are struggling the most without it causing a further spike in inflation?
Well, the trouble is that, there's about a third of households still doing fine and they've got plenty of buffers and will be able to handle this, not a problem. But a third of households are in severe difficulty already. They've already got cash flow problems and they're trying to make hard decisions. There's another third of households sort of caught in the middle and getting dragged down towards the more difficult end. So my point would be that if they really want to do some targeted intervention, it would be significant in terms of scope and price. So that's a problem for the budget because the budget's in structural deficit, but also it's going to put more significant inflationary pressure because those who are in more difficult positions, if they're handed more money, they're going to spend it. And the Reserve Bank's strategy is to strangle spending. Now, the other point to make there is retail turnover was up 0.6% as reported yesterday. So we are still spending quite a lot, although, in fact,
are we just buying the same stuff, though?
Things.
Yeah, we're just spending more on the same
stuff. Yeah, okay. We're paying a lot more for the same stuff. So it's tricky. Yeah, very tricky.
Well, we'll see. I think we can pretty much guarantee rates will go up after this afternoon's meeting. It's just a question of how much, and we know that we're in for some pain for some time to come. Not great news, but thanks so much for your insights, Martin.
Thanks.
That's Martin North, Principal with Digital Finance Analytics here locally. Yeah, not great news.